Sharing my screen now. And thank you, Carol, for all of your comments and turning the meeting over to me. So now we'll be hearing from our speaker. And have you ever wondered about the people who lived in Central Oregon for about 10,000 years prior to the arrival of the European settlers about 200 years ago? Have you ever wondered about the lives of the descendants of the people who lived here for so long? Jalen Suppa from the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs is here today to help us understand more about those lives. Jaylyn is a mother, educator, advocate for social justice, and a member of the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. She was raised in Senasho, Oregon, and is a traditional food gatherer for her tribe. On her mother's side, she is Cree Canadian. She is the mother of 2 beautiful children. Her passion is decolonizing education for herself, her children, her community, and she always looks for ways to incorporate her culture into home, classroom, and programming. Jaylyn works for the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs as the community planner for the Health and Human Services branch, advocating and advancing health equity practices and policies. She currently serves on the Oregon Indian Education Association Board and on the Health Equity Committee of the Governor's Racial Justice Council. In these roles, she uses her voice to work towards equitable health and education for all. She developed the Papal program, which incorporates historical trauma, healing, self-identity, cultural awareness, high school readiness, college, and career readiness in a curriculum she and 2 other Native teachers developed. Her background includes cultural awareness trainer, traditional health worker, youth mentor, historical trauma facilitator, curriculum development, and youth program development. Please welcome Jalen Suppa.
Hi, good morning, or well, good afternoon. I feel like it's still morning. So I don't know if I'm able to share screen. I don't know if
Yes,
I have.
you can.
Okay. So I always think I have enough time for my presentation, but I never do. So if I'm going too fast, please slow me down. It's just really that I'm trying to get all the information into this short amount of time. Like it was said, I'm from the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. I'm an enrolled member. I have 2 children, and I currently reside here in Warm Springs in the agency district, and that'll be important to note as I move forward in the presentation. So a little bit of history about the tribes. We signed our treaty in 1855, and that's kind of where our reservation boundaries were defined, and some of our rights to be able to fish and hunt and gather roots and berries on the reservation, and as well as our ceded lands, which I'll show you a map of down the road. We also developed our constitution and bylaws, and then in 1938, and then we did our corporate charter in 1938, and then our Declaration of Sovereignty in 1992. And so you can find, I have the link on the bottom, and I can definitely put this in the chat at the end after I'm done presenting, but there is a link there. And I got all of this information you can find on our website. And you can just Google Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, and our webpage should come up, and you can find a lot more in-depth information there. So the Treaty of 1855, what did that do for us? So it So we're one of 4 Columbia River Treaty tribes, which is down. My clan comes from the river down on the Columbia River. And so when we talk about the Confederated tribes, which I'm going to get into in a minute, there's 3 tribes within the Confederated tribes of Warm Springs. And so we have 3 different languages. We have 3 different histories, 3 different traditions, all of those things. And then, so when I talked about ceded lands earlier, we have about 10 million acres that we ceded to the United States. And then our reservation is 640,000 acres. And I'm going to show you a map here soon so you can kind of get an idea of what that looks like. And the map that I'm going to show you does include our ceded lands. And then our treaty gave us the right to be able to, gather, do ceremony, hunt, fish on and off the reservation. And so for me, I am a designated tribal food gatherer for my district, which I'm in the Simnasho district, which I'll talk about when we get to the map. And so in our district, each family can designate 2 women to be food gatherers. And so we gather roots and berries every year. And a lot of the time we're gathering for our ceremonies, our funerals, and our name givings, things like that. And so I am a designated food gatherer for my family along with my sister. And that's handed down from generation to generation. And so I took the place of one of my aunts who's actually still living. She just can't walk anymore. And so she chose me to take her place. And then my sister took our other aunt's place who did pass away and selected her prior to passing. So you have the 3 tribes, like I mentioned. You have the Wasco, which is the Wasco band of the Columbia River. And I think what you should know is that we have these tribes. You have the Wasco, the Warm Springs, and the Paiute. But within that, you had clans, you had bands. And like my family's band was the Tyke band, which means a lot of the times we were in the Ty Valley area, which is on your way to the Dalles. And we moved around for food. So we moved by seasons, but a lot of the times that was where we, I think, wintered. And so we had bands. And so even amongst the tribes that are listed, there's multiple bands within that, but there's just way too many to list. And a lot of the times it kind of matches up with families. So that's why you'll see the word bands in here. I guess it's just in short to say that it's very complicated and complex, and that it's not just, we can't be lumped in together as even one tribe, because amongst that we're 3, and then you go to even beyond that to bands, and each family does their things in the way that they do, how they've been doing it for generation to generation. And so the Wasco band, Brendan J, please, no. When you're done with that, can I come again? Brendan J, I'm in a presentation right now. Please go do your schoolwork. Sorry, my son's. So like when you read this, we look similar. Like we all, for the most part, we harvest roots, we get berries, we do salmon, we hunt deer and elk. But then you go down to language, and each one has their own language. So the Wascos have the, I'm trying to look for the name on here because I can't, it's not the, oh, it's not, that's not right. They have their own language. I'm part of the Wasco tribe, but my main one is the Warm Springs one, which is in the middle. And in that one, it's the Ichishkin language. And so we have, so my grandmother is one of the last fluent speakers for that language. And then you have the Paiutes, and they have their own language and dialects. And then if you move out, then there's, the Chinook jargon, which is kind of the trade language that we used when we were trading down on Celilo Falls, which is in the Dalles area. And so here's the map. So as you can see in the red, there's the reservation. Simnasho is actually where I grew up. And that's the agency area, or that's the Simnasho district. Then the Warm Springs area that you can see with the red dot, that's where I currently live, and that's called the agency area. Then you go right below Warm Springs, it says Siksika. That's our southern end of the reservation, and that's our Siksika district. So you live in 3 districts and you vote in 3 districts. So anytime I vote, so when I vote for leadership, I vote for the Simnasho, and that's broken down. So Simnasho district has 3 reps plus a chief. The agency district has 3 reps plus a chief. And then the Siksika district has 2 reps plus a chief. So in total, there's 11 tribal council members. And then you can see this map shows our ceded lands. And so it goes as far as over by Prairie City, John Day area, all the way down past Bend, probably maybe Sun River, and then on over to Cascade Locks, Hood River, down over to Arlington. And so all of those places is where we have the ability to go and fish, hunt, harvest our roots, our medicinal plants, all of that. Our treaty gives us the right to do that. Now, does that happen all the time? It doesn't. There is private lands, and sometimes we're cut off from private lands. Sometimes people don't allow us to go onto land to do it. We're often stopped by police and questioned of what we are doing. My family has digging grounds in the John Day area where my grandma has taken us, and we're often questioned when we go down there. And so a lot of the times we're, carrying our tribal membership card to show that we are tribal members and that we have the right to be there to do what we're doing. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, and we're told to leave. And sometimes those are scary situations. I take them very seriously. I also take the ability to do what I need to do for my family and to continue what we've done for generations serious as well. So this is the structure of our organization. This is an old org chart. I don't know what year this is from, but this is what it still looks like. I think this is just a 2019. And so you have the tribal membership would be me as a tribal member, not as a staff worker, not as a committee member or anything. And so the membership has, they're the ones that guide the decisions when votes are taken to the membership. That's only when votes are taken to the membership, but you can also, I heard some mention of Knope. It's the same thing with our councilmen. They're kind of like our legislators. You can appeal to them, you can ask them, you can take things to their table, just in the same way you would to any of our legislators in Salem. And so then you have tribal council, and that's where the 11 members sit. And they're voted in by each district. So they're voted in by their district. And I'll let you in on a fun fact. And it's very fun for me because now I'm not in that seat, but I ran the last time around, and my dad also ran, and my dad beat me by 1 vote. So, but now when I look at everything that they're dealing with, I'm kind of glad I'm not in their situation right now. So, and he's doing a fabulous job. And so, but yeah, he beat me by 1 point. And that's the first time I ever ran for our tribal council. We historically don't have younger people on our tribal council. A lot of them are older. And so I was surprised by the turnout of how many people voted for me. So where I'm positioned in this org chart is, so you have the secretary treasurer, you have the chief operations officer, and below that on the far right, there's the health and human services branch. So it's the second box on the far right. And I'm in that branch. That's where I'm located, and that's where I get to do my work. A lot of my work is cross-sector work with all of these other branches and departments. I certainly believe in collaboration and partnership, and we do that amongst ourselves internally. And so that It's huge. We have a ton of staff. So just within the Health and Human Services, we have anywhere between 2 to 250 employees just in that branch alone. And so I'm not sure what the other branches hold because I'm not in those branches, but that's just giving you an idea of one of the branches of how many staff are in that branch. And so when we're working cross sector, it might seem like it should be easy, but we're spread out throughout the reservation here in the agency area. And we all have our own goals, missions, sometimes deliverables, depending on our grants and things like that. And so it's not as easy as people think it is. But I'll talk about that more as I get into this. I'm just going to stop right there for a second and see if anybody has any questions. I can't read the chat. I see that there's
Jaylyn, I can share one question for you. People are very interested in what you're presenting. So at the end, if you're able to email me your presentation, we can include a link in our newsletter.
Okay. Okay, I see the question. How many members are there? There is about just over 5,000 members, and about 3,500 of those members live on reservation. So we have about, I don't know, 2,000 or a little bit more that live off reservation in all the different areas. And they're also able to participate and vote when we have votes come up. We have a mail-in system. Okay, so I think I answered the questions. All right, so the program that was mentioned is the Papal program. And so you can see I tried to, as best as I could, spell it out for people. So it's Papa, La, X, Si, Mi, Sha. And that is a word in the Etruscan language, which is my language, and it means unity. And so we are a sister program of the Deschutes program, if you've ever heard of them from OSU Extension or OSU Open Campus. So we are kind of a model of them. They're our sister program. We started out, and so that's kind of where the name came from, because the Juntos means together. Then there's the Together program that comes out of OSU Open Campus. And so we wanted to kind of mirror the same type of name of bringing us together, because the program, our mission, which is we're right now in the middle of redefining our mission. But I'll read this mission and then I'll kind of highlight some of the areas that we are starting to shift. To provide American Indian Alaska Native students and their families the information and resources for high school readiness and completion while creating a pathway to career and college readiness. The program explores historical trauma and the impacts while creating space through an Indigenous lens to empower healing for our students, families, and communities. So that's all still true, but we've gone even up a level of, I feel like what is here is kind of a 10,000 view. We've gone up to about a 25 or 50,000 view. And really we're focusing on the ultimate goal of our program is healing people, healing families. And I know that sounds strange. That sounds strange to a lot of people when I talk about this program, but it's really, we're developing a wraparound services model that is focused on getting our students. First of all, we moved our program back. Instead of being a career and college readiness, we are doing high school readiness, and we're preparing them in the middle school age, so that, because there's a lot of dropout rates that happen between 8th grade and freshman year. So we're trying to fill that gap and decrease that dropout rate right in that area. And so now we do a high school readiness portion as well as a career and college readiness. And we also don't focus just on college. We focus on vocational, the different type of jobs where you can just have certifications and you don't necessarily have to go to college as well. And we actually have a shortage of that in the tribes of plumbers, electricians, chefs, nurses. So we really expanded and shifted our program to focus on healing. And what does that mean? And for us, our program, it means that we have to understand the impacts of historical trauma and how does that impact our community, and what does that mean for our students as they're going into the educational system, where a lot of the historical trauma began with boarding schools, with the boarding school era.
Yeah.
And so there's a negative impact on the educational system and sending children to schools. So we're trying to break down what does that mean and how do we interact with that, and how do we use that as a strength and move forward in our education. And when we say education, we don't mean just strictly public school system education. We're talking about our cultural education. We're talking about language. We're talking about the health and well-being of our families. We're talking about their housing. We're talking about food insecurities. We're bringing all of that into it because we know that all of those impact a student's education. So what does our work look like? So it's definitely cross-sector. We partner with a lot of folks locally, regionally, even nationally. We're pulling in partners all wherever we can. We use a whole person approach. We really dive into the social emotional, a trauma-informed approach. We focus on community and grassroots and allowing the community to lead the program versus us as a program leading the community. And so we really look to our participants, our families, and our community to guide where our program's going. And so we're really reactionary to the needs of our community. And we just, if they say we want yoga, we now have a yoga class. And so we're offering yoga for the next 6 weeks. They asked for a book club. We started a book club. So we're just, trying to provide spaces and resources right now, especially during this time. And so a lot of our shift moved to virtual, and which was a really nice shift actually. But now we're trying to figure out how do we weave in both, because, people are going back to school. We need, people need to be able to see people and have that interaction. So we're trying to figure out what is that balance. We focus on wellness, community care, capacity building. That's a really big one for me. I'm trying to build capacity within my program with staff and then with our youth. And so we have a leadership development component that's not only for the staff, but for our youth, for our parents, for our community, in ways that we can either provide resources or connect them to resources. And it's multi-generational. We work with Head Start. We work with mothers who are pregnant. We work with grandmas, grandpas. We are multi-generational. We call it cradle to grave. And so anywhere in between all of that, because we know that it takes the family for our students to be successful. And, in all the basis of everything that we do, we try to do it with love. We try to make sure that we're positive and we're role modeling everything that we're putting out as a program. And so it's really important to me of who I hire and who's doing this work and who's carrying it, because it's really important that we're also doing the work ourselves as staff, and that we're not putting things out there that we wouldn't be doing ourselves or that we haven't gone through ourselves. And so lived experience and really sharing our stories is really important to this program. I think I seen something in the chat. I can't see the chat. Is there a question? Okay.
Question about how is the internet
In your
access?
role of food gathering, and wondering if people who are from outside the tribe but live in your ceded areas like sisters could actually participate with you in gathering roots and berries.
Okay, so I see. Do you join the I would have to find out. It really depends. I know personally, my family has allowed people to come in and join us, but it's all, it changes and shifts them based on what people are comfortable with. So I can speak from a personal perspective on that is, if the relationship is there, if there's, the intentions are, I don't want to say correct, but that's the word that's come to my mind, but just, are very intentional. Our family's been pretty open about that. I can't speak for other families. I can't speak for the tribe. I can only speak for myself on that question. And then, so our tribal languages are actually in the school right now at the K-8 Academy, but at a very limited basis. And I say that because I think it could be done in a more deeper, intentional way. But right now it is what it is. Like my daughter and my son are both in a class and they get about 20 minutes of language. And because they switched to virtual though, they're able to do it 4 days a week versus when they were in person, my daughter only went once a week. And then my son sometimes went every other week, depending on the schedule. So, so there is, but it's also not enough to be able to sustain the language over time. We are talking about offering community classes. Our high schoolers aren't taking it right now. It's only offered to, I believe, 4th through 8th grade. Whereas before it was going kinder through 8th grade, but then the in-person instruction started happening, and so they had to limit it to 4th through 8th grade. So that actually discounts my son, so he's not able to participate, just my daughter, because she's in 4th grade, he's in 2nd grade. So and you know, our capacity with our language teachers, we're still building our capacity. To one of the languages, they don't have any more fluent speakers, and the Ichishkin language has, we just lost 3 in the last probably 3 months. We've lost 3 of our fluent speakers to 2 was from COVID, and then 1 was just recent, like yesterday. And so we are getting down there. I think I could probably count them on one hand of the last fluent speakers of the Ichishkin language. And I know that the Paiute language, they only have a few, if any, left as well. So our language teachers, they aren't fluent, but they would be considered probably in between novice and fluent. So they're at a place where they can teach it. And we're always looking for more funding to be able to hire more teachers and teach the language and be able to keep the language going. So internet access. You may experience it from me today. I may freeze up a couple of times. It's some days you have good days and some days you have bad days. A lot of the times I have to turn my camera off when I'm speaking in order to not sound like so and it does definitely affect education. The very first day there was like our internet service went down for school, so like kids were scrambling, and one of my staff out in Simnasho, she texted me because she had service on her cell phone, and she said, can you let my son's teacher know, because our kids were in the same class, that the internet's down out here. So I text the teacher, and so we do have internet issues. And then if you're out even further out from the agency area, it's worse out there. So the major challenges I think right now that I would be not being able to get together, which, you know, is out of our control. And I completely understand it. Just makes it difficult too, because not everybody can get on Zoom, get on Facebook Live, have access to technology. And the assumption is because all of our kids got computers that now our families can be connected, but that's, you know, our school district does remind us that their computers are only for their education. And so a lot of families don't use that technology, even though it's right there, and they could be using it for job applications or connecting to resources or getting on Zoom meetings and things like that. So that's one thing. I would probably say funding. You know, funding's always a challenge, because I guess you can have enough funding, you know, and have an abundance of it, but with the work that we do, we're always constantly moving and spending. And we're always trying to get things out to our community. Like we buy backpacks for all of the kids. We try to buy some of their school supplies for them. We've bought PPE, we've bought hand sanitizer as a program to hand out to our families with our events. We've bought food for food boxes. And so a lot of the times we're just purchasing our own resources to give out for our families. And then I would say when we were meeting in person, it was challenging for people to come and gather, whether it be, you know, childcare. So we did offer childcare stipends, and sometimes just providing food. And so, and then just working all day. A lot of people work and then they don't want to come to, a meeting in the evening. So trying to find a balance and try to break down those barriers for families to attend. And so incorporating fun things too at the same time and not just getting down to business. We do that a lot. The rollout of vaccines for COVID. So we are in, the last I knew, we are in what we're calling stage 1 plan, I guess level B. And so we did kind of the essential workers, which meant our utilities departments that were still going through and cleaning buildings, our medical staff, our teachers, our staff that have been at work, like I was one of them, our language teachers, all the people that have been kind of working and still offering services during the time. So all the essential workers. And then now we're in B, which is everybody that's 75 and older. So right now they're focusing on all of our elders. And so we aren't even through, we still have a C in that one. And then we go to step 2, which has an A and a B. So we're not even halfway through our vaccination plan yet. I heard it's been going very well. I took my grandma in like 3 weeks ago and she got hers, and she's coming up in about a week. She'll get her second one. So it sounds like it's going really well. I think it's very slow paced and we're having to request more because the first round we only got 400. So, okay, let's see. So wild resources, so our natural resource department and our cultural resource department take care of that. And I actually worked in our cultural resource department. And so we used to go out and do studies and make sure that there was no off-roading. And then also just educating the community, because not everybody does what we do. Not everybody goes out and digs, not everybody goes out and hunts. And so just educating the community on what is what and, where to look for it and how not to destroy it. And so there is a department that focuses on all of that and how to try to make sure that it doesn't go extinct and how do we maintain it, and you balance that with the animals and livestock. So, and that's our natural resource department and our cultural resource department. Yeah, so our language speakers have been recorded. We do have a lot of audio that's been recorded in the past as well from people that have passed on. So we definitely do that. And they're housed in our language department. And so access isn't as accessible as I think we would like, but I also understand why. I will talk about the water. It's later in the thing, well, in my presentation, not in the thing, in my presentation.
I can read these for you, Jaylyn, if you want.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm glad to read these if you want, or you can just go ahead and do what you're doing.
Okay.
The next one I think is from Monica Tomosi, with Deb Haaland as the first U.S. Secretary of Interior, who is Native American. Are there any specific federal policy changes you hope for to help heal or to benefit the Warm Springs people or the indigenous people in the U.S. overall?
I have not looked at that yet.
Okay.
In my opinion, I think even just her being in that position is a really good step, because I know there's a lot of tribes right now working on what does that look like if she's in that position, and what does that mean for tribes, and how will that change, the tribal consultation and government to government relationships and how business is done. I haven't looked to any extent of how that will impact us. I'm sure it will, because we do have several things that have been on the table. And so, but I have not looked at that specifically. But I know just the fact that if she's in that position, it'll definitely, I think, create a shift and hopefully some change in the long term.
Jaylyn, we have questions rolling in. Would you like to complete your presentation or answer questions as they pop up in chat?
I think I'm gonna go maybe a couple more slides and I'll go back to the questions. Just so I
Okay.
can go through these. Okay. Okay. So these are just a few flyers. I'm sure you got to look at them while I was speaking and answering the questions. So one of the things that I was asked to talk about is the museum at Warm Springs. So this was opened in 1993. They're currently closed right now due to the pandemic. But that's, you know, it's along Highway 26. It's across from our casino. It's really beautiful. We try to take students down there and do some education. It's a really nice exhibit. My daughter just submitted art for their tribal art exhibit, for the tribal youth art exhibit. She's a painter and she loves to paint. And their mission is to preserve the culture, history, and traditions of the 3 tribes, which comprise the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. The museum was designed to provide a welcoming site to the public as well as safe conservatory for the traditional treasures of the tribes. And so if you've never been in there, it'll go through the history. It'll go through the history of the tribes in more depth. It'll go into some of our culture and our traditions. My favorite is the wedding ceremony. It's one of the exhibits in there. I love just looking at just all of it. I love the look of it. And then I also did put the link to the website. And so this might answer some folks' questions. I know the one about the water, it's here. So COVID-19 has definitely impacted our tribe. And, you know, not only physically, but emotional. And then there's been a lot of racial impacts that have happened, being, you know, on a border town of Madras, and, you know, some of the implications that natives are the ones that are taking COVID over there, and all kinds of things that I'm surprised about, but I'm also not surprised. We've had 683 total positives here in the Warm Springs do testing since I think we started testing in June. I'm not sure. I was on a party of the response team when COVID happened. And so I haven't actually had time off. A lot of people in Warm Springs, they got admin leave. I was not one of them. I started having to order PPE and, you know, calling around and getting that. And of course there were shortages everywhere. And so we were on the phone, me and another coworker were on the phone and trying to order everything. And then we start ordering touchless stuff. And so I can't even remember when that was. I think it was like maybe April. So we did have water issues. We still have water issues. We just got off a boil water notice out in our part of our reservation out by Kanita. If you've ever been to Kanita Resort out there, they had, I'm not sure what was going on with the pipes, but something was going on. And so they were on a boil water notice, and then their water was shut off a couple of days. And so we still are having water issues in different parts of the reservation. I don't think we've gone a month without not having a boil water notice, whether it's one day or a week. And so I did put the link in there, and I can drop that in the chat later if you need me to. And I'm on so this is the Choosh Fund. I actually serve on the MRG, which is the Mackenzie River, Mackenzie River Gathering Foundation. And they worked with our tribal council to start this fund to make it easier to be able to donate, because donating straight to the tribes is difficult, and it made more sense to have an outside organization take the lead so that we can just start taking donations as soon as possible. So MRG stepped forward and created this fund, and it's still open. I think the last I knew we were at like 130,000. I haven't checked the last couple of months. And so, you know, and at the same time, last summer we were having evacuations due to the fire. There wasn't a fire on the reservation, well, northern, or I guess northwest, but the smoke, especially out in Simnasho, was pretty thick. And so they did some evacuations up there. The fire did get close to the reservation border in the northern part of our reservation, and that's where I live, which is why I know more, well, where my grandma lives, and I go out there a lot, know more about that one than the Lion's Head fire that ended up going that way and was devastating. I did talk about the internet connectivity. You know, it does play a role. It is a limitation. It is a barrier for some. So we've had a total of 19 deaths from COVID, and we've lost roughly 55 to 60 people since June. And, you know, the 19 are included in that 55, but we've been losing people. And we've not been able to do our regular, you know, normally our funerals last 3 days, and we usually could go up to 5 days because we have services at the home prior to the funeral actually starting. So when like the body's at the morgue, or they're just not ready yet, or there's something else going on, sometimes we have services within the home until we can actually dress and have our services. And so sometimes a funeral can go up to 5 days. And so minimum is 3, and we haven't been able to do that. All of them have been within a day, and it's really having a strain on our community and our traditions and our ceremonies. I was lead for census during the pandemic. I wasn't originally lead. I was lead on the food for all the events. It was going to be my duty to make sure that food was at all of our events. And then the pandemic happened. And so as a community planner, my supervisor said, well, you're going to lead census. So I led census. I did drive-throughs. We did raffles. We did giveaways. We did shows on Facebook Live. We did a walk and a run. So we tried to get really creative. And we actually doubled the census count from the 2010. So I think we ended with, I don't know, like 67% or something. I just know we doubled. I know we doubled. So it was really great to be able to do that and be a part of that. And our houses are multi-generational, so it makes it really hard to quarantine. We have a nurse shortage, and I just found out the other day that we lost 2 nurses. So now we're down to 1 in our community health department. We did hire 2 more on our IHS side, and so we have a community health that's tribal, and then we have our IHS that's the federal. And so we are okay on the IHS side, which is great because they're doing everything, but that means we lost our contact tracers and follow-up folks on this side. So so that was kind of a bummer to hear the other day. And like I talked about, we are losing our knowledge keepers and traditional language keepers and our elders. So I am at the end. So I can take questions. My contact information is right here. I'll leave this up for a second, and I'll look at before I close it out, and I'll just take a look at the chat to get back to the questions. I don't know how much time I have.
We have until 1 o'clock, Jaylyn.
Okay.
So another little more than 15 minutes.
Okay. So I'm going to stop share. I can put my email in the chat as well, so I can answer the questions. So the last question. There is recourse. We can go to the courts. We can also file complaints. I think we just don't do that. I don't think anybody's ever really won when they've done that. So I think for me, I think it's really just about education, because a lot of people don't know that we have the right to be there. And so they just don't know. It's not that it's anything malicious or anything. It's just they don't know. And so I think there needs to be just better education all the way around. And that's, and that's including all entities, not just the tribes. That shouldn't be just on the tribes part. That should be on law enforcement, Forest Service, all of that stuff. So, but yeah, I've heard of some people, trying to take it further, but it didn't really go anywhere. And I don't know if that's because we didn't understand the system or didn't know how to work through it. I'm not sure, but there is. Are there any initiatives to decolonize the curriculum at Oregon? So there is the Senate Bill 13, which is, I believe it's tribal history, shared history, I believe is the title of it. That is actually, I'll put it in the, I can't type.
And that's in the legislature this year.
It was in the last session and it got passed, and then I think they attached funding to it, and so right now they're in the planning stages. So it was supposed to roll out this last school year, but then the pandemic happened, so they pushed it back, and that gave tribes the ability to, oh, I sent it to okay, let me hold on. That gave the tribes the ability to create their own curriculum. And so for instance, our 3 tribes are creating kind of their own track for each tribe that will be taught. And I think it's grades 3, 7, and 11 the first year. So it's supposed to continue until every single year you have something around the tribes and tribal history. But there is kind of a little, I think, loophole that school districts can get out of it, because it's not, they can choose which curriculum they can use. So there's a state curriculum that the state is preparing, which is kind of a 50,000 view. Then there's the tribes who are more of like a 10, 15,000 view, which is more specific to each tribe. And the school districts can choose which one they want to use. So they can use both. They can use just the state, they can use just the tribes. And so I think that's going to create a little bit of a barrier, because, like when I'm thinking about our tribe, it's 3 different tribes in one, and they're going to be like, we don't have enough time for that. So maybe we just go with the state one, which is a general overview, which is then they're losing out on being able to really learn about the 3 different tribes.
Like there's a question about, can you explain how it works if a person wants land for a home? Are they allowed to build a permanent home? Can anyone own land?
That is an interesting question. So you can put in for land. It is quite the process. And so yes, the answer is yes. It's just a really lengthy process. You have to go through our committees, and then you also have to get permission depending on where the land is, because there was allotments, and so families got allotments. And so if it's a family's allotment, you have to ask their permission to build on their land, or you have to be within that lineage to build on that land, but you still have to get permission of whoever is currently living in that allotment is theirs. So for instance, my grandma has an allotment, and if I wanted to, I can build on her land there. Because she's given me permission. I don't want to live I'd be living on her doorstep. So, but that's just an example of, I would be able to build there because she's given me permission. Then I just have to go through all the other processes. Thank you for sharing the MRG link. And there was a question that got sent to me privately that I'm going to read. Are there ways that we as local communities can help you, or opportunities to possibly affect the 3 tribes in general? I think just opportunities like this, being able to speak to people, do some education. We're always looking for donations. My program is always looking for donations of like books, of items to give our speakers, and just resources in general. And then I think, if you're ever in meetings where where, you know, maybe this does impact the tribe, maybe asking that question, like, where are the tribes in this? Have you spoken to the tribes? Have you heard from them? This seems like it impacts them, or this is in their area. That's always helpful. That's where I've been brought into many conversations where they're like, they didn't think about the tribes. And so I asked, and can you come to this meeting? And so I'm like, yes, I can. And then we get involved, and then, you know, there's that relationship building that starts happening in that tribal consultation, which is extremely important and should be happening everywhere and at all levels.
People are asking about a cultural practice aspect to Senate Bill 13.
What do you mean by that?
John, do you want to elaborate on what you mean by the cultural practice aspect to Senate Bill 13?
Yeah,
You can-
you know, the history is great to have more than just one history being taught. But when I just recently retired from the University of Hawaii, and I know that there's a strong cultural aspect to that's growing and gaining momentum among the Department of Education schools in Hawaii. It's more than just history. It's cultural practices. You know, the kind of, and it's exposing Hawaiians and non-Hawaiians alike to that part of what's valued in the Hawaiian community. And I'm just, you know, and I think history. I'm glad to hear that we're going to be, that students will learn more about the history of. I grew up in the gorge, and you know, between Warm Springs and Yakima, had Native American friends, and didn't learn a thing about anything to do with the tribes, and that's such an oversight in my opinion. And but I think beyond just the history, there's just, you know, you guys have practices that are unique to your communities, and it seems like that would be nice if the education experience included some of that. So that's where my question's coming from.
Okay. So yes, there is, and that's going to change though and range from tribe to tribe, because you'll get most of that in the tribal developed curriculums versus the state developed curriculums, because the state developed curriculum is very broad, just kind of history, kind of a brush over. And then the tribal history, the one that the tribes are developing themselves, really dive into it. And so my aunt is actually a language teacher, and she is helping develop the curriculum along with my grandma. And that's one thing they're talking about, is talking about like our funeral practices, you know, how I told you there are 5 days, talking about that. So not only other students understand why a student might be gone for a few days, but also the teachers will understand why a student might be gone for a few days if their grandma or their mother or their aunt or uncle passed away. And so talking about those ceremonies, talking about naming ceremonies. So it does get in more in depth, and definitely talks about our culture. It just is going to change on how much is shared based off of each tribe and what they're willing to share. I know that ours, they're talking about, my aunt, you know, she's trying to look at it in a way of how do we educate not only our students, but their peers and the teachers, so that they understand where our students are coming from. And so that's the way she's been creating her curriculum. But I can't say that for everybody. But yes, there at least for, I can speak for the one, that there will be components of our cultural aspect and our traditions and what they mean, and explaining them a little bit more in depth than they've ever been explained. And sometimes they've never been explained. So.
Thank you.
And it looks like we have a question from Don Hartso about, are members of the reservation motivated to vote in state and national elections?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I just so happen to be running for school board in the 509J school district. And this is a question that I'm asking myself as well. Because what I've found, because I've been doing kind of get out the vote and trying to get people registered since I was in high school. I think when Carrie was running, I was doing get out the vote stuff and trying to get people to register. And I wasn't even old enough to vote yet. I missed that one by 3 months. So I was pretty bummed. But they're not, I've heard a lot of them say that it doesn't mean anything to us, but at the same time, they also don't participate in our tribal elections either. So it's just voting all the way around. And just, I think a lot of it comes down to education. And so when I'm out there, I'm asking like, why don't you vote then? You know, what would help you vote? What would make you vote? You know, and, you know, why aren't you voting? And so like the school board elections, it's a very, very low turnout. We have probably about, I think we have almost 2,000 eligible voters. And out of that, about 20% vote. So maybe about 500 vote in the election, and that's in the school board. And then, but this year we had a record number of residents that voted in this election. So I think it's just all about education. We've been trying to really get education out there. And so, I mean, but I think also we're having more people run. And I think that's another reason why they're starting to get engaged is we have people running as well. And so they can relate to them. They can, they know that they're coming from their hometown. They might be able to speak on their behalf, things like that. So, but historically we haven't voted. I'm an active voter, but I would say half of my family aren't active voters. And so I'm always encouraging them to vote. And so I can imagine other families are the same way.